Hello, everyone. Sorry I couldn't be here today, but instead I went ahead and videotaped my lecture for you to get us through the rest of Chapter 2. So get ready. We are actually going to accomplish something today. So let me go ahead and get us started. All right, here is the day's schedule. We're going to finish going over the content for Chapter 2. We're going to review for a quiz you will have next class on September 18th. We're going to prepare vocabulary cards for the next chapter. So we're going to close this chapter out by the end of the week. We'll test on it next week, and then we will continue on with the next chapter. Okay, right now, go ahead and get out your notebook and calculator. You can come borrow a calculator if you need one. Remember, you put something in the bin that you will be sure to get back in exchange for my calculator, so that I make sure that I get all of my calculators back. So the instructor is going to go ahead and pause the recording right here while you go ahead and get organized. You're also going to need something to write with. So notebook, calculator, something to write with. So go ahead and do that now. Go on. All right, we're ready to go. Go ahead and turn to page 28 of your notebook. If you remember, we spent some time last class talking about significant figures and all of the rules for determining how many significant figures something has. So now we're going to talk about what you do with numbers when you add, subtract, multiply, or divide them together. So go ahead and take a look at rule number 5 there on page 28 of your notebook. You have a handout that has rule 5 there in the upper left-hand corner. Now, some classes have done this already, so if you have, just listen for a review. If this is brand new to you, then go ahead and take notes as directed. I'm going to do my best to slow down so you have plenty of time to take notes. However, if for some reason you don't get everything that you need, you will be able to see this on my website, and the web address is on the wipe-off board at the back of the room. Opposite from where you are right now. You'll be able to take a look at that and take a picture of it or write it down towards the end of class. All right, so let's go ahead and read along with the text there under Rule 5. It says, find the number that has the fewest sig figs, which stands for significant figures. That's how many sig figs should be in your answer. So when we're multiplying and dividing, we consider the number of significant figures that are in the numbers that we have. If you remember, we talked about this. Different numbers have different amounts of significant figures based on the precision of the lab equipment that was used to get those numbers in the first place. So when you multiply and divide by them, you need to take into account the level of precision that the original numbers had. So that's the whole purpose of this. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at the first problem there, part A. All right, so the problem reads 3.35 times 4.669 is equal to 15.571115. And then there's a little explanation underneath it, because although that is the answer that our calculator gives us, and you don't have to work it out, I promise that's the right answer, that's not the correct answer. If you were to give that to me on a test, you would get a point taken off. All right, so what do we need to take into consideration? The number of significant figures, or sig figs, each one of those numbers has. 3.35 has 3 sig figs. That's 3 non-zero numbers. Remember, we don't take into account the decimal point. 4.669 has 4 sig figs. Therefore, the answer must also have 3 sig figs. So we are going to round that number so it has 3 significant figures. So 15.571115 should be rounded to the third sig fig. And what I've done, if you look up at the board, I have written that number down and bolded the number that you're rounding to. So that 5 that's bolded is the number you're rounding to, so you look at the number next to it, and that's a 7. So that means that you round up, which means 15.6 is your final correct answer, which is the number that's listed there in your notes. So let's look at the next problem. The next problem says 124.6 times 3.14 is equal to some number. So go ahead right now at your desk, work out what that would be. Don't round it out. Don't round it according to significant figures. Just go ahead and write down there in your notes what the answer is. I'll give you a second. Go on, go do it. All right, the answer you should have written is 391.244. That is the full answer. However, in the chemistry world, that is not the correct answer. We have to take into account significant figures because we multiplied those two numbers together. So we look at 124.6, and that has 4 sig figs. 3.14 has 3 sig figs. Therefore, the answer should have only 3 sig figs. So if you look at the board, you can see that when you round that answer, you should get 391. The number that you would round to is the 1. You look at the 2's digit next to it, and that means that you keep the 1 exactly as it is because it's less than 5. So if you don't have that already, go ahead and write that down. All right. So the next 2 questions, parts C and D, are yours to complete if you're not in the classes that have already done them. I'll check these on Thursday. Don't worry about writing this in your agenda quite yet. I have a slip of paper that has all of your homework on it. So just right now, circle or star those if you haven't done them already, and that'll be part of your homework for next class. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Let's go ahead and look at Rule 6. Everyone needs to perk up now. No one's gotten this far. All right, Rule 6, which is for addition and subtraction. Go ahead and read along with me. Find the number that has the fewest digits to the right of the decimal point. The answer must contain no more digits to the right of the decimal point than the number in the problem. So please make a note of how multiplication and division and addition and subtraction rounding is different. Multiplication and division is based on significant figures. Addition and subtraction is based on the number of decimal places. You need to commit this all to memory because if you do not round your numbers correctly, when you're doing math from here on out, you will get points taken off. All right, so let's try the first problem, part A. And it says 64.25 plus 5.333 is equal to 69.583. That's what our calculator tells us, but that is not the actual correct answer. Because this is addition, we look at decimal places. This is important because if you were to look at sig figs, you would be tempted to say, oh, one number has 4 sig figs, the other one has 4 sig figs, therefore you round to 4 sig figs. That's not how this works. So let's take a peek. 64.25 has 2 digits to the right of the decimal place. 5.333 has 3 digits to the right of the decimal place. Therefore, the final answer should only have 2 decimal places. So you can see I went ahead and showed you through bolding the number, what you're rounding to, that 8 is what you round to because it's the second decimal place. The number next to it, 3, is lower than 5. So your correct answer is 69.58. If you don't remember how to round numbers, that is something I will go over with you next class. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the next problem. And the next problem says 19.855 plus 21.5 gives us some number. Go ahead and punch that into your calculator and write down the full answers. The full answer for this particular problem. All right, the answer you should have gotten is 41.355. That is the full answer. That is, however, incorrect. So let's go ahead and break it down. If you look, 19.855 has 3 decimal places. 21.5 has 1 decimal place. Therefore, the answer can only have 1 decimal place. The final answer is going to be 41.4. The reason is that you would go to the 10th place, that 1 decimal place, which is the 0.3 in the original answer. Then you notice that the number next to it is 5, which is 5 or higher, so you round up. Now, as you're writing this down, do not be fooled in any sort of coincidence between the significant figure rules and for multiplication and division and the decimal place rules for addition and subtraction. It may look like in some of these examples like they're the same. They're not. Make sure that you follow the rules as they're written down. Multiplication and division, you look at sig figs. Addition and subtraction, you look at the number of decimal places. All right, so the next 2 questions, parts C and D, are yours to complete. Don't try to do them now. You'll have time at the end of class. I'll check these on Thursday. So again, you don't have to write this in your agenda right now. I'll give you a slip of paper, or the instructor you have right now will give you a slip of paper that has all of your homework assignments on it towards the end of class. Just go ahead and make a little note to yourself. We're going to go ahead and press on to percent error, which is the next section on that page in your notebook. So go ahead and take a look at the text and formulas. I'm going to read them to you now. Also, please note where it says percentage error, it's got page 45 in parentheses. That's where it shows up in your textbook. So if you're someone who likes to read your textbook along with the notes that are given, there you go, you've got the page. Not necessary, but nice in case you need to refer to something else. All right, it says, error is a measure of the accuracy of the values in your experiment. It is important to be able to calculate experimental error, but there is more than one way to calculate and express it. Here are the most common ways to calculate experimental error, and you can see there are 2 formulas there. I promise you, you will have to memorize neither. The only formula you will absolutely have to memorize in this class is the formula for density, which we already went over. So take a look at those formulas. The one for error says experimental value minus known value. That's it. The one for percent error says percent error is equal to, there's a weird up and down bar looking thing, and then it says measured value minus actual value, and then another bar looking thing, divided by actual value times 100%. And we're going to talk about what those bar things are in just a second. All right, so we're going to solve the first practice problem there, number 1. You can either solve it at the bottom of this page or on page 27 of your notebook, wherever you have room. So read the problem as I also read it now. A researcher measures the mass of a sample to be 5.51 grams. The actual mass of the sample is known to be 5.80 grams. Calculate the error and percent error of the measurement. All right, if you don't understand where to start, I always suggest that you pull out and label all the numbers. So let's go ahead and do that. The measured or the experimental value is 5.51 grams. Those 2 words mean the same thing. And then the actual or known value is 5.80 grams. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a minute to write that stuff down. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on and calculate error. And error is simply going to be 5.51 grams minus 5.80 grams is equal to negative 0.29 grams. So go ahead and write that down. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about this just for a second. There are some things that you need to check when you're doing error. Error has units. In this case, the unit is little g, which is grams. Error can be positive or negative. In this case, it's negative. That shouldn't bother you. And then have you checked for appropriate rounding? This is a subtraction problem, so you check for decimal places rather than sig figs. You need 2 decimal places. You have 2 decimal places, so you're good to go. We can go ahead and move on to percent error. All right, so before we calculate percent error, look at the formula. Note the straight lines in the numerator, which is the top part of the fraction. Those are absolute value lines. In other words, percent error will always be positive. Look at the units. When you use the formula, all units cancel out except for the percent sign. Therefore, the final unit will just be a percent. All right, so we're going to go ahead and just plug the numbers into the formula. So you can see, don't start writing yet, just listen. You have the absolute value bar, 5.51 grams, minus 5.80 grams, absolute value bar, divided by 5.80 grams, and then times 100%. So go ahead and get that written down. And I'm going to give you a minute to see if you can calculate the answer. Okay, one more minute. Okay, did everybody get 5%? Woohoo, if you did. If not, again, we will discuss this next class. But here's the deal. What about significant figures? All right, multiplication and division always takes precedence over addition and subtraction. So the final answer should have 3 significant figures because each one of the values that you originally used also had 3 significant figures. So your actual final answer is 5.00%. So go ahead and make that adjustment to your answer. Okay, so practice problem 1A is going to be yours to do for homework. Please remember as you're doing these, I will be grading you for completion instead of correctness. So, give it your best shot. I understand that it's kind of tough to really understand what's going on when I'm not there, but you're honor students, so you should be able to figure out most of it just based on the explanation that you've seen. All right, on page 30 of your notebook, go ahead and turn to page 30. You're going to see that this particular part is labeled proportions, and it talks about directly proportional and inversely proportional. Read that page of your notebook and differentiate between directly and inversely proportional relationships. Be able to identify a graph of either, and be able to identify the relationships between variables in a given formula. We'll discuss this more next class, but it's going to help your understanding if you've already read it. So again, you'll have time at the end of class and also between now and Thursday to go ahead and get that read. Okay, so that is the end of chapter 2. So you will shortly get a practice sheet that will prepare you for your quiz on Thursday. And yes, you're absolutely having a quiz on Thursday. On this practice sheet, one side is determining the number of significant figures in a given number. The other is scientific notation, putting numbers into scientific notation and then determining the value of the numbers already in scientific notation. Or, as I like to call it, zipping numbers into scientific notation and then unzipping them again into their original form. This particular sheet of paper that you're going to get is going to go on page 29 of your notebook. You can see there at your desks, you've got all the staples and scissors and trash bins that you need to go ahead and make that happen once you get that sheet from your instructor. You're going to have 15 to 20 minutes to get the sheet done. Then your instructor will tell you where to check your answers. Okay, you need to try instead of just waiting for the answers to pop up and just sitting there for 15 or 20 minutes, because this quiz is going to happen and you'll only have 5 or so minutes to ask me any last minute questions that you have. So you'll check your answers. You'll make a note of any questions that you want to ask me before your quiz on Thursday. And it will be a very similar format to the worksheet that you're about to do. All right, once you're done with that, once you're done checking your answers, you'll go to the back and count out 28 half index cards and place them in a Ziploc bag. You'll also pick up one of each slip of paper next to the cards in the bag. One slip of paper lists the vocabulary words you'll prepare for Chapter 1, which is the next chapter we'll cover. The other slip of paper details what you have for homework. You'll have the rest of the period to work on your assignments, and I will see you on Thursday. So again, you're going to be getting that practice worksheet. You'll have 15 or 20 minutes to get it done. Once that time has passed, the instructor will let you know where to check your answers. You'll do that, and then you will proceed to the areas where you'll pick up your index cards and your Ziploc bag and your assignments. It'll all be labeled for you back there, and then you'll have the rest of the period to work. You have textbooks there in the middle of your desk as well, which will help you with your vocabulary words. So, again, I'll see you guys on Thursday. Get it done. See you soon. Bye.